Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Just past 3 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is our June edition of our monthly assessment and accountability TA call. And just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I'm sure you all know we are recording this. We'll provide the link to the recording as well as the PDF of the presentation.
How would I word that?
After this meeting. And second of all, please mute yourself if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat, unmute yourself, etc. So first off, just some introductions in case there's anyone new here. We are the assessment and accountability team. There's 3 of us. Selchuk is our supervisor. Brandon, that's me. I coordinate all the activities, and Pat, who is also on the line, is our admin assistant who assists with a lot of our reporting activities as well. So here's our agenda for today. Just looking at the ongoing and upcoming assessment and accountability tasks, as well as updates. The first agenda items are related to assessments. We'll go through some WIDA, Smarter Science NA, and ACT updates. And then we have some accountability updates, various tasks. I'm sorry, it's kind of a long list, but various tasks are due that we will go over. And then finally, we'll end on some notes on the upcoming NSPF star ratings. All right, so the first assessment is related to WIDA. The 21-22 WIDA data should be available in WIDA AMS as of 2 days ago, the 14th. So you should be able to go get your final results from the vendor, from DRC WIDA, download your school or district files, depending on if you're a network or just a school. And you can look at those data and you can find proficiency levels for students and then start exiting if you haven't already, based on maybe the earlier data that was posted. And if you are exiting students, you can use an exit date of the last day of the school year in IC on a student's EL tab. I'm sorry, there's someone waiting in the lobby that we are trying to admit. And I don't know if that box is showing for everybody. That's kind of blocking the entire screen for me. So sorry if I'm trying to read around this. But the final results for 21-22 from NDE should be available in July. So as you know, or as many of you are familiar with, the vendor provides some results, but then NDE will provide the results file that they use to calculate NSPF related items, including the additional file WIDA growth, which is not provided by the vendor. So that should be available in about a month. So a reminder to please mute yourself if you haven't already. Thank you. So key dates for the other group of assessments, Smarter Science and NAA. All those files should be posted to DRC Insight sometime around mid-July. So again, about a month from now, those Smarter Science and NA. Then you should get student and roster reports posted about a week or 2 later from that. And then you should get the printed reports sometime in early August. The NDE files, so again, you'll get these vendor files from DRC, but then NDE sort of like cleans them up, adds some other fields possibly, maybe like merges validation day demographics from those vendor files when they're missing something. So NDE's files will be used for the NSPF, and those will be available in mid to late July. And again, NDE will calculate growth for smarter balanced assessments, and that should be available in mid to late July. And we'll talk about what they're using for growth there in a little bit. As far as ACT, those results should be available to schools. If you haven't gotten them already, you might want to get in touch with ACT and ask them what's going on, because it said 5 to 8 weeks following Sorry, just getting some feedback, so please mute yourself if you haven't. So you should have the ACT results. If you don't, please contact ACT. NDE, again, is doing a data validation for that, as they do every year, because there is no way to validate ACT data through the ACT website. So NDE needs to validate that, or schools need to validate that for the NDE, and that will open in DVSL on July 1st and close the 14th. So it's a pretty tight 2-week window. Hopefully it's straightforward. Everything should be pretty clean, but we will have to go through that, and we will notify the relevant SPCSA high schools once NDE opens that. Okay, moving to accountability. The first task is Nevada report card, and this is due June 28th. This is phase 2 and 3. We've already gone through phase 1, and I think that went pretty smoothly. Hopefully you think it did as well. We've submitted those data to NDE and kind of QA'd and validated that. Again, these data collections are required by state law. They are separate from NSPF star ratings. These are just additional data that are posted on the NDE accountability portal website, the Nevada report card website. So like the process for phase 1, we've set up a epicenter certification task for phase 2 and 3. There is a table at the right here that shows all of the items that need to be collected as part of the report card. Again, deadline June 28th. There's some details on the following slides that we'll go through, but had a few questions about this. In the gray box at the bottom there, just a note that the following items will not be collected. There's funding sources. That's going to be provided by the vendor to NDE this year. So in the past, we've collected something that said like, the school, where's the school's funding coming from? It's 70% federal, 20% state, 3% local, etc. That's not being collected this year. We did confirm it with NDE, so we don't need to collect that. Logos are not being collected. The PDF reports are no longer going to be generated school by school. They're only going to be generated at the district level. So we don't need logos from you all to put on those reports. And then finally, we're not collecting headings, which is sort of the standard info that we already have from you because it's in Epicenter. It's things like your school name and your address and the principal, the phone number. We have all that, so we're just going to enter that on your behalf. And there will be an opportunity to review a lot of this later. So there are multiple portions to these collections. You can kind of see in this table. In the last column on the right, collected via survey, Bighorn, survey, etc. So we'll go over the survey part first. The survey is at this link. It's also in the Epicenter task that we've set up. But we have provided this link via email. We're providing it here in case you don't have access to Epicenter. Maybe Academica as an example, or your CMO, EMO runs Epicenter for you. But there's a survey link. This survey includes the following. There's student transiency, which is optional. You can allow us to pull those if you like. You can note that in the survey. There's long and short-term subs, professional development funding, special programs, and various narratives like mission, all the way to highlights. So these are all things you have seen previously from last year. Unless you're new this year and have questions, we're more than happy to answer that. There is an Excel worksheet like we did for phase 1 that you can use to prepare your data for entry. So I know sometimes when you get to the survey, you might not be able to click next without entering something. You don't know what exactly is being collected. So we did provide that survey if needed, that worksheet if needed. So the next items relate to the report card uploads. We can't unfortunately collect these in a survey because they are student data specific to your school, and the survey doesn't allow us to do anything like that, unfortunately. So the first is the dropout file. This is only applicable to schools that were open 2 years ago. So now 2 school years ago, 2021, and that had grades, 1 or more grades 6 to 12. So when you complete this file, it does need to go into Bighorn because it's student level data, and that's personally identifiable information, PII, protected under FERPA. So we just need to be very careful about that. And that's why we can't really do a survey to collect this, because we're exchanging student information back and forth. So We did put files with pre-populated student information in your Bighorn folders. You can find them in that folder noted there. You do need to download those, edit in the appropriate fields. Here you're marking whether each student was a dropout or not, and then re-upload it to the same location when you're done. This dropout file, has the population of 6th to 12th graders at your school from October 1, 2020. So this is 2 validation days ago, and that's why I'm saying it's only applicable to schools that were open during that time period. So NDE has taken that validation day file and just added one additional column that's on the rightmost column, dropout. All you have to do is enter yes if the student is a dropout as of October 1, 2021 validation day, or enter no if it's not. So it's just kind of a year time frame, a snapshot, like on October 1 this year versus October 1, 2021, did the student drop out between that time period. So you may have students that like kind of came to you after October 1, 2021, or they dropped out not in between that time period. All you need to focus on is the population in that file. We did make a pass at the dropout status column using various methods. Like if the student was in October 1, 2021 validation day, they're obviously not a dropout. So we use various methods to kind of look up the students and see if they were dropouts or not. But we did fill in a bunch that were dropout, yes, but you should check those and revise as needed. So if you know the student actually isn't a dropout, then you can change that to no. For example, you might have information we did not have. So in Infinite Campus, it might say the student was a dropout, they had a whereabouts unknown dropout code, but you actually know the student did transfer and they transferred to another school in the local school district. And we might have marked them yes, but you want to change that to no. So the NDA said don't add and remove students, don't change anything except dropout status. We previously provided a PDF with detailed instructions, including the dropout code crosswalk. So like W3E5, is that a dropout? W2A, is that a dropout? Yes or no? We'll provide that again after this call with the post-meeting materials. The next one is the upload of the DF20 retention credit deficiency file. So same process. We've put a pre-populated file with your student information on Bighorn. You got to go download that, edit it in the right fields. So this one is just marking whether each student was retained or credit deficiency, or credit deficient, and then re-upload that file back to the same location in Bighorn. So this population of students is from October 1st, 2021. So this most recent validation day. And then the question is, were they retained at the end of this school year, at the end of the 21-22 school year? So there's a retention column, mark them yes if they were retained. Again, only if they're K8, and mark them no if they're not retained or if they're no longer at your school. For grade 9 to 12 students, NDE does not use retention for them, but they use sort of a proxy credit deficiency. And you're marking here if they're credit deficient or not at the end of the school year. And if they're no longer at your school, you can mark them no. There is the definitions of credit deficiency here that are outlined in NAC. So for example, if the student reaches the end of the 9th grade year with less than 5 credits, that means they're credit deficient, and so on. So we've provided that in a PDF with detailed instructions. Again, don't add or remove students except to change, or don't change anything except that status, retention or credit deficiency. So here are some FAQs. We've gotten a bunch of these questions from various schools, so I thought it might be useful to just outline them. So the first bullet here is we collected the certain information last year. Where are they this year? As I mentioned a couple slides ago, we don't have to collect these for various reasons. The next one is, will schools have an opportunity to review data provided? In some cases, such as most data and number entries, so that's like average daily attendance, student-teacher ratios, etc. Yes, there will be an opportunity to review those, and you can check it and kind of make sure we entered everything correctly. And in other cases, when there's narratives, it will be difficult to provide those because it doesn't come out on the PDF for the district. But a school, if you are concerned about that, you may be able to check EDSA if desired, and you can contact us for help. So when we get to the end point of these data collections sometime in early July, we will put together some information about how you can check everything and provide data for you. And we'll go over all that at that point. Nothing you need to worry about right now, but we'll make sure there's an opportunity. Professional development funding, there have been some questions about the prior, is it really for the prior school year? It is. Everything in the report card is for 21-22 generally, but this one is not for whatever reason. In the dropout file, a student is marked as a dropout, but is not a dropout. Yes, you should fix that before submitting. We did make a first pass, and there may have been some language saying like, don't change anything in the file, but that only refers to the data fields other than the dropout status column. So definitely check those, especially them students that are marked dropout, yes. Next one's a student was retained or it's credit deficient, but it's not in the pre-populated file that's on Bighorn. So NDE didn't put them in the file for you. Perhaps they came to the school after validation day, so they weren't in that validation day snapshot. What should be done? You only need to mark students that are in the file. So if the student wasn't with you, you should just ignore that. And then how do we submit data? There you can check the Epicenter task for details or this presentation. There's a survey for some of it. Others need to be uploaded to Bighorn. All right, that's report card. Next are the ADAM data collections. These are due late June to mid-July. So these are the data files that will be used by the NDE to calculate various portions of your 21-22 NSPF index scores. Remember, we'll talk about this a little bit later. No star ratings this year, but there will be index scores. So NDE will be using these files to calculate those index points scores. So there is the CCR participation and completion measure for high schools. That's in the ADAM 1 file. Chronic absenteeism, that is in the ADAM 2 file. That is a measure for all levels, elementary, middle, and high in the NSPF. And then there are the 8th and 9th grade credit requirements that are collected through ADAM 3 and academic learning plans measure in the NSPF, which is also collected through ADAM 3. So the 8th grade credits is for the middle school framework, 9th for high school, and then the academic learning plans is for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So that is also middle school. So the ADAM 1 files, the CCR, that is due later in July because AP scores tend to come in sometime in mid-July, and NDE is providing time for schools to take those data and use them to complete this file. This is only for high schools with students that had an OYOG, original year of graduation, of 21-22. So that's generally 12th graders this year. So if you're a high school that maybe only has 9th and 10th graders right now, you don't need to submit this. We previously provided the template and detailed instructions. There is also an appendix in this presentation that we won't go through the details, but there are detailed guidance there. So when that file is complete, you can post it to Bighorn and let us know. Chronic absenteeism. So this is the one where we sent out communication before saying don't run it yet. There's a problem with the report. We have a little bit more information that's on the next slide, and now it is due July 8th. All schools must submit this, elementary, middle, high. It is relatively easy to do this, but because there are complications this year, it might be a little bit more work. You have to run the report out at Infinite Campus after the school year is over, which I think it is for everybody at this point. Post it back to Bighorn and let us know. And if we don't receive a report, we'll run it ourselves. I think we'll get to that point when we get to it, but usually everyone's pretty good about turning that in. ADAM 3, which is the credits and learning plans, that's due the end of June. This one should be really straightforward. And that's an error right there. I'll fix that before it goes out. It's not all schools that must submit this. This is only schools that have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, sorry. That report also can be run out at Infinite Campus, posted back to Bighorn, etc. So there is an appendix. Like I said, there's detailed guidance. We provided that previously, but it's also in here. So some additional notes on chronic absenteeism, because there was that issue where we said don't run it yet. a little bit of background on this. The legislature passed a bill last session that requires absences due to physical or mental health, where MDP absence codes are used, to be excluded from chronic absenteeism in the NSPF. But they can't really do anything about the federal reporting. So unfortunately, that just it is a good thing for schools, but it creates some complications because now state reporting will be different from federal reporting. So what NDE had to do is try to update the report in IC to give a state rate and a federal rate. The state calculations, which are the important ones, that, or at least our schools probably think they're the important ones because it relates to the NSPF. Those are working, but the federal one is not working properly if your MDP code is set up as exempt. So if your school has MDP code set up as not exempt, you can run the report as is. But if you have MDP set up as exempt, this is what NDE has said to do. You got to change the code to not exempt, either wait for an overnight refresh or do a manual refresh later in the day to not affect your IC status. Run the report and then change the code back to exempt. So they sent out an email this morning. We'll include it in post-meeting materials. And then on the next slide here, there's kind of a location of codes in this exempt, not exempt field. So I pulled this from one of our schools. This is under, you can find your attendance codes under system administration if you just kind of want to poke around and see where you're at. So that's where it is. You pull that up. You can look at MDP. If you click on MDP, it pulls up this detail about it. And here it's the excuse is exempt here. So this is what NDE is saying to get federal reporting to do it. So this will work for your NSPF reporting. And NDE said to get the federal reporting correct, you got to change this to non-exempt and then run the report. So I will leave it at that. That is what you should be doing. The next one is computer science data collection. This is due June 30th. This is SPCSA high schools that had a graduating class. We previously shared template with those schools. Basically, NDE is trying to figure out if schools are offering computer science courses as part of NAC credit graduation credit requirements, where you have to have 0.5 credits of computer science. So unfortunately, they're requesting this. It's not required by statute or regulation. It's just something they want. And I'm sorry, because I know it's right in the middle of actually required collections. Due July 1st, this is the NDE PEBT data collection. This applies to schools participating in the National School Lunch Program. You may have heard about this if you participate in the SANE Bighorn calls on Wednesday mornings. And if you don't participate in that, I highly recommend it. Please contact us if you need to get an invite to that. We'll talk to NDE and get you on that list. Through PEBT, basically students can receive temporary nutrition benefits that are loaded on EBT cards to purchase food. So if your school participates in this NSLP, you must submit a completed file to NDE via Bighorn. NDE has provided directions on how to do this, and then once you upload it, we'll share it again. Once you upload it, you can submit a fresh desk. If you don't participate, you still must submit a ticket to fresh desk stating as such. All right, July 29th. This is for high schools, CTE data collection. I believe this one actually is required by statute or regulation. So this is related to work-based learning and industry recognized credentials. If it doesn't apply to you, we've heard from some schools saying this doesn't apply to us, please don't email us anymore. And we said, sure, no problem. I think I skipped a slide. Here we go. Back. So now, after all those tasks, sorry about all of them, we are going to talk about the NSPF very quickly here. We've got about 6 minutes left. So the USAID, you might remember the last time we talked, USAID, NDE had submitted an addendum to USAID, basically asking for permission to do things a certain way with the NSPF because of missing data, because we've missed ratings the past 2 years. Like, it was basically a way to say, like, here's what we plan on doing to remedy those type of things. So USAID did approve that about 3 weeks ago. And again, it will address issues resulting from the lack of data in the past 2 years. So per the addendum, this is what NDE will do now. This is, again, this is what they were proposing. This is now what they will do because it has been approved. So they will shift the long-term goals forward 2 years for academic achievement and grad rates. So the state has these goals that by year, by student group, and it's being shifted forward now because of everything that's happened. So NDE won't count waived accountability years as years for improvement in schools that are underperforming, CSI, TSI, ATSI. And then probably the thing that most of you care about the most is they will calculate NSPF index scores, but not assign star ratings. Last we heard from NDE, they're looking into whether they're going to generate modified NSPF reports that just say the score. It's kind of unclear at this point if they're just going to provide a big data file or if they actually are going to give reports. So we've already talked about this previously, so we'll kind of skim over it, but this is what they were proposing again in the addendum and what is now approved. So growth, that usually is 2 consecutive years, but now they are using, or sorry, it is 2 consecutive years. Usually they were debating whether to use older data and newer data, but it has to be between 2 years, and they are using last year's and this year's data. For school designations, CSI is going to be those schools, the lowest underperforming schools, Title I in the lowest 5th percentile high schools with the less than 67% graduation rate. And then for TSI, I know this is a thing that a lot of you look at. They will be designated based on underperforming student groups from 2018-19 and 21-22. So whereas with growth, they're using the last 2 most recent years. This one is going all the way back to 2018, 19, and 21, 22. So the way TSI works basically is like if a student group doesn't meet a target in 1 year and doesn't meet a target in the other year, they may be labeled, that school may be labeled as having underperforming student groups. We can talk about this a lot more in detail at some point, but that's the gist. Assessment participation, we mentioned this previously, all warnings, penalties will be reset for the NSPF. Schools that don't meet 95% for the school and also for the school or and all student groups will receive a warning. Penalties will be starting next year or restarted next year. Chronic absenteeism, there won't be bonus points like there usually is for a 10% improvement because there was no chronic absenteeism last year. And then there's just some additional notes on assessment participation for your records. We won't go into this in detail, but there's some notes here about what it means to be a participant, logins, or do you have to answer a question, that sort of thing, and how participation is calculated by the NDE. Well, we should know more about participation soon, I think. I think NDE is looking at the preliminary files, and you may hear from us if there are issues with participation. There's our contact information, and there's our thank you. And like I said, there's an appendix with detailed guidance on how to do these Atom 1, 2, 3 files for your reference when you start working on those. So I will leave it at that. And I don't see any questions in the chat, but feel free to unmute yourself, type in the chat, raise your hand, and we'll try to answer any questions here. I know we're running out of time, so if you have to drop off, feel free to, but I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes to answer any questions. I see a question from Crystal. Will these notes be shared with all of us or only our lead in the system? Generally, if you're on the invite, what I do is a reply all to the invite after the meeting, and you should get all the information. So we'll share the recording link, we'll share the PDF of this presentation, and we'll share any other relevant information that I may have said we're going to send, like the PDFs with detailed instructions on dropouts, that type of thing. There's a question from Bruno. Who do I email or contact to get invited to the Wednesday meetings? I think that would be Sane Support. Let me see if what their email is here. Here it is. Although it's for outbound emails only. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to find a good email.